All right, folks, I'm going to call the meeting to order. As required under the Planning Act, a public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a decision on these applications. And right off the bat, I'll introduce the committee members. We have Mr. Strangway, Ms. Richardson, Ms. Archer, and I'm Mr. Robertson. And staff here is the Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Lahi, and Acting Assistant Recording Secretary. And staff remotely, we have Mr. Hawley, the Manager of Planning. We've got David Harding, Planner 2, Kent Staten, Planner 2, Suzanne Murchison, the Chief Building Official, our Recording Secretary, Ms. Crockford Toomey, and I think I've got just about everyone there. All right. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Mr. Strangway, Ms. Archer, any comments or questions related to the agenda? Being none, all those in favor? And that carries. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? The approval for the minutes of the last meeting, I need committee members that were there, so I'm looking to, okay, Ms. Richardson, seconded by Mr. Strangway. Any further comments or questions on the minutes? All those in favor? And that carries. All right. All right, for those here and online, the committee will hear comments, gather information, and may ask questions to clarify statements made. The committee may ask and answer questions or redirect questions to the appropriate person. Please note that any information or comments given to the committee during this meeting, those are considered evidence. We will first hear from staff, then the applicant or his or her agent. We will then hear from any person in support of or from those who have questions, concerns, or are opposed to the application. Finally, the applicant or his or her agent will have an opportunity to respond to any of the statements made to the committee. All righty. Having said all that, we'll move to the agenda. And we're first of all dealing with file number D20-2020-028, and this is 31 Riverview Road, let's see, former village of Fenelon Falls. And before I do that, I'll just mention, I didn't, that anyone wishing to speak, we will afford you 10 minutes to make your presentation. Most people need far less time than that, but if you find that you just can't get it all in within the 10 minutes, I will ask the committee if they wish to afford you more time. But as I say, I don't think we've ever had to do that because most people get it in within that period of time. All right, having said that, Mr. Harding, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. So this first application proposes a series of reliefs to permit the construction of a single detached dwelling on private services as well as a detached garage. Next slide, please. So reliefs are sought from the exterior side yard, which is considered the western lot line, and the street center line setbacks along that same side in order to permit the construction of those two buildings. So as you can see on the aerial photograph here, the subject property is located within the former village of Fenelon Falls on the west side of Fenelon River, and that while the neighborhood is within the urban boundary of Fenelon Falls, it has a rural residential and rural waterfront feel due to the narrow width of the road network in this area, as well as the substantial amount of vegetation on all the parcels. Next slide, please. So here we can see the proposal here. So we've got the dwelling and the detached garage on the far western side of the parcel there. Committee is going to see a few different colors here. So we've got a red line. Everything inside that red line, so on the right side or eastern side, is existing wetland. The red hatch is wetland that is to be removed for the septic system, and then the green is the areas that are not currently wetland that will be created wetland in order to compensate from the wetland that's removed for the septic system. Next slide, please. So here we have some images of the dwelling that is proposed. So this is a two-story dwelling with a walkout basement design. Next slide, please. And here we have the detached garage. Next slide, please. So we have some pictures of the site. So I'll walk you through the pictures before I continue on with my report here. So the image on the left is showing from kind of the lower part of the subject property looking north. So where you can just see the front grille of the truck there. So that's in and around that spot where the dwelling would be. And then I've walked a little bit further down the road and pivoted looking south, and we can just see some driveways leading into kind of the end of this stub of Riverview Road. So Riverview Road is a very small road. It's a small stub, which basically serves only a couple of addresses, as shown in that picture there. Next slide, please. So in the image, in both images, I've walked a little bit further north from where that vehicle was parked in the previous set of photographs. So this is more the northwestern limit of the property. So on the image to the left, that's about where the intersection with Winchwood Crescent is. And then flipping back, you can see, I believe it's Kent that's standing in the middle of the road there with his jacket. That's about the driveway entrance where the vehicle was parked. So what you're seeing here, committee, the frontage right along the side of the photograph, this is what would be developed to contain the dwelling and the house. And this also gives you a sense of how this road is really a laneway width. Next slide, please. So in this picture, I've gone down to the river, which is behind me in both of these photographs, and taken pictures looking west into the property. So the image on the left is the creek that runs through the southern boundary of the lot, and then the first dwelling kind of south of this parcel. And then the image on the right, I pivoted slightly looking more northwest. And those trees kind of in the middle of the photograph in the back there, that's the site where the dwelling would be proposed. All of the vegetation more on the right side of that picture is within the wetland body. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we have some other pictures. So you can see in both of these pictures, committee, the vehicle that's parked there again, or the driveway entrance to the parcel right now. So we've got the Riverview Road allowance and travel portion of the road on the right in both of those pictures. And then the yellow line that I put in there is approximately where the road allowance ends and the western lot line of this parcel begins. So what you can see here, committee, is you've got a fair bit of, or a little bit of level topography next to the road, and then the property gradually slopes down into the ravine where the wetland is. Next slide, please. And then I've walked to the edge of where that slope starts and just taken some pictures into the ravine. So if we can back up a slide, please. All right, thank you. So staff is of the opinion that the proposal does meet the 4 tests for minor variance in this case. The property does have severe topographical challenges. As we can see here, the site, which is currently shown, the cedar tree clump that's next to the road, is really the only spot that there is a development envelope that, that could be made out of this parcel due to all of the wetland constraints and valley constraints to the east and the southeast. Riverview Road is modest in width and serves a very small number of homes to the south. Overall, a land use conflict that is anticipated to exist between bringing the house and the garage closer to the road and the traffic on this road is expected to be modest due to the volume of traffic expected on this road. And also the private areas of the home are not oriented towards the road. They are pointing away from the road to help increase that privacy within the rooms that would be abutting this road. Also, we have a courtyard design that is proposed for the parking area for this property, that being the land between the northern face of the dwelling and the southern face of the garage. So that way we are making sure that all of the parking and maneuvering associated with that is brought into the parcel to minimize impacts parking within that municipal road allowance, because the road is already quite narrow. So this property is designated low density residential within the Village of Fenelon Falls official plan, since the secondary plan for the Village of Fenelon Falls is under appeal right now at the board, now LPAT, and single detached dwelling uses are permitted within this designation. So due to the above analysis, staff does respectfully recommend that the application be granted, subject to the conditions identified in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? Mr. Strangway?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just through to Mark, the green areas that are indicated on the map, are those currently wetland areas? Are those going to be newly created wetland areas to compensate for where the home's going?
Mr. Chair, it's just wanted to make sure that was actually for me and not for Mark.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. So yes, the green areas are currently not wetland, but they will be created wetlands as a result of the development on this parcel.
David, can you just explain to me what you mean by created wetlands if they're not currently wetlands?
I'll do my best through the chair. So this is something that the applicant and owners have been working quite extensively with the Kawartha Region Conservation Authority on in the months prior to filing this application. So it is a wetland compensation plan. So my understanding is that as a result of the site works that will be covered under permit by the KRCA, part of those works are to create new wetland bodies to offset the loss that is required to place the septic system.
Okay, I'll leave it at that for now, David. Perhaps you could give me some more information on that at a later date. Thanks.
Mr. Harding, just to follow up on that then, so we can construe that as part of this wetland compensation plan then, is it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, what the applicant has submitted is a wetland compensation plan that the KRCA is supportive of as part of their permitting process.
Thank you. Ms. Richardson, did I see your hand?
Yes, through you, I just wondered if the Kawartha Conservation comments should be included as a condition.
Through the chair, I don't believe so. What they've identified is that the property will require a permit from their office. And I think that we can safely say that we're very aware that this property is regulated and their office will need to be satisfied before the building permit process can proceed.
Do you have a follow-up?
As a follow-up, is our building department aware of this? So if it's not in a comment, how will they be made aware of Kawartha Conservation's requirement?
Through the chair, I can speak to that. It's applicable law to the Building Code Act that any permit that is taken out for a property within a regulated area of a conservation authority is required to have an approval from the conservation authority before we issue that permit. So we will be catching it.
Yeah, and just to follow up, I totally agree with what Ms. Richardson has said. Because I think, Chief Building Official, you've mentioned in the past that you don't mind having these red flags identified so that nothing is missed when you commence the building permit process. So that's why we ask all the time, because I think it's important, because things do get missed. So, but you're suggesting that there's no need then to red flag that permits are required from KRCA for you down the road?
That's correct. There shouldn't be any need for it. if it's in a regulated area, it is a requirement of the building permit.
Thank you. Any further questions of the planner? Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Hey, good afternoon. Yes, I am. My
Your
name's
na-
Evan Bombino. I'm accompanied by my wife, Monica, here. We're the owners of
Yeah.
the subject property.
Do you want to state your name, sir, please? Would you state your name for us?
Evan Bombino.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
So first and foremost, I would say, I've watched a few of these and many people have said it, but I'll say it again. Working with your staff, specifically David Harding, has been great and very appreciative by both myself and my wife. He's been a big help for sure, as well as the rest of the staff. And so I think I could probably create some clarity around some of the questions that you folks have asked as well. So we purchased this property without a provincially mapped wetland. And through we knew that there was a downstream flood condition through a water resource engineer that had mapped the watershed, but did not know about the wetlands. So we hired quite an extensive team through the guidance of KRCA. So we hired a geologist, ecologist, water resource engineer, municipal engineer, and that's how we came to this plan. And so as far as the wetland compensation, there's a few options that you do have. And part of the reason why we bought this land is we want to keep the ecological value of this land. And so that's why we're building wetland within this parcel and not offsite. We had the option to build offsite as well, but because we have the space here, we will build on site. We think down the road for our family, our kids, that'll be a nice feature to the land. And then obviously, we're doing all possible to create a net gain of wetland. And there's a lot of cleanup on that land that will actually increase the ecological value. So we've submitted a wetland compensation plan to KRCA for final comments, but we've worked with them the whole time along the way through the EIS, through the wetland compensation plan, cut fill analysis, as well as the watercourse engineers. And I think it's important to state here, we're not here today because we're trying to create some type of monstrosity on a small parcel of land. We're creating what we believe a modest cottage and vacation home for our family with a detached garage. And the reason why we're in front of you as a committee is because we want to keep high and dry and out of that floodplain. And as well, the building envelope has shrunken because we are creating wetland on this parcel of land. And that's why we're asking for the 0.2% relief on the accessory building. And I'm willing to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you, sir. It would appear that you certainly have covered all the bases, and we do appreciate that, your efforts there. And also, thank you very much for your comments with respect to Mr. Harding. He is a professional, does a very professional job, but we always, never any problem with thanks. We like to hear those sort of things, so thank you for that. Are there any questions? All right, being none, is there anyone online that wishes to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone wishing to speak in support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? In opposition to the application? All right, being none. I just wanted to get back to Mr. Harding for a minute, if we can bring him back up there. Mr. Harding, I'm looking at, and we'll see how it goes, but I'm looking at condition 2. And I believe that we need an amendment there, if for no other reason than just correction, where it states, Part 8 sewage system stating they are satisfied with the proposed sewage, rather than that is satisfied. Are you okay with that?
So clarification, we're adding the word "it."
They are. It'll read Part 8 sewage system stating they are satisfied with the proposed sewage system.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I definitely support that change.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. So keeping in mind for motion, it will be amended to read that. Comments from committee? Anyone prepared to make a motion? Mr. Richardson? as amended, printed as amended, and seconded by Mr. Strangway. Any comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right.
Thank you for your time.
Moving right along, we're now dealing with file number D20-2020-029, and this is 93 Kennedy Drive, Geographic Township of Emily. And again, Mr. Harding, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application proposes an approximately 21.5 square meter sunroom addition to the rear of an existing dwelling. So the property is located within the Shoreline residential neighborhood on the east side of where Pigeon Lake narrows into Pigeon River. And staff is of the opinion that the proposal meets the 4 tests for minor variance. Next slide, please. All right, so here we can see committee. I'll get back to this. I'd like to go into the photographs first before I finish my analysis, but this does demonstrate part of my analysis quite well. So we can see that the 2 parcels to the north of the subject property are closer to the shoreline than the subject property, and the 2 parcels to the south are, the first one is about in line with, and the one after that is stepping back a bit. So what is being proposed here is very much in keeping with this stepping away from the shoreline that we see from north to south. Next slide, please. All right, so here we have the sketch of the proposed sunroom on the rear of the dwelling, and then there's 2 accessory buildings as well. The condition that identifies the need to remediate one of these accessory buildings is the smaller of the 2, which is between the dwelling and the northern lot line. Next slide, please. All right, so here we have some images of what the sunroom will look like. Next slide, please. And now we get into our site photographs. So this is what the property looks like from the road. It is a fairly deep property. Next slide, please. So heading into the parcel, this is what the front of the dwelling looks like. So this is a single story, single detached dwelling with a attached single car garage. Next slide, please. And then we have pictures of the rear yard here. So the image on the right shows the location of the rear of the dwelling that is to be extended by adding the sunroom. It's approximately going to be what we see as the sliding doors and then the red taped area around that. And then the image on the left is me standing at about where the shoreline is, looking back towards the dwelling. And again, we can see the sunroom kind of on the right side, or sorry, the proposed sunroom site on the right side of that dwelling in that photograph. Next slide, please. And then in this slide here, I've walked up from the shoreline just a little bit. And what I wanted to highlight, which I think the staff reports speak to as well, is you can see that there's a low retaining wall. And that is the site where there's kind of this outdoor at-grade patio feature for the dwelling. And the sunroom is proposed on top of this existing outdoor patio feature. Next slide, please. All right, so here the image on the left, we can see a little bit of that retaining wall showing that at-grade patio feature again, being separated from the rear yard that's a bit lower down. And then that image is taken looking to the north. And then the image on the right, I've just walked to the opposite end of the patio surface and looked to the south. And basically where, for this image on the right, where the patio ends in the foreground of that picture is about in line with where the sunroom would project into the rear yard. All right. So as I focus on the patio area already, I'll identify that again in the staff analysis here. So right now we're really proposing no net change to how the rear yard is going to be used. It's an existing patio area, so we're just enclosing that patio area. The rest of the landscaped amenity space within the rear yard is not going to be touched, so there's no adverse impacts that are anticipated to the function of that rear yard as an outdoor amenity and recreational space. Also, when looking at the length of the proposed sunroom, as well as the projection into the rear yard in comparison with the lengthy wall for the remainder of the dwelling's rear wall, it's really, the amount of projection is quite modest in comparison with the rest of the lengthy wall for this dwelling. So we don't expect that there's going to be any substantial adverse massing impacts as a result of this small projection of that total longer form. And then highlighting that, again, this parcel is part of this natural progression of built form that's being stepped away from the shoreline. So we have the properties to the north that are a bit closer, and this subject property here is still a little bit further back than those parcels to the north, but still is part of that progressional stepping away from the shoreline that we see that's even more pronounced in the two properties to the south that continue to get further away. So the property is also within the waterfront designation of our official plan, and residential uses are anticipated within this designation. Staff does respectfully recommend that the application be granted, subject to the condition identified in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? Mrs. Archer?
You, please, to Mr. Harding. I probably missed it in the report, but what is the reason that they have to remove or relocate the one shed?
Through the chair. So whenever we deal with various applications, we do a comprehensive zoning review of the parcel and try to ensure compliance through this process. So the owner and applicant are aware of the zoning compliance issue, and we've included a condition to ensure that it is addressed.
Is the zoning compliance because it's too close or too many outbuildings?
It's too close.
Any follow-up? No. Anything further from committee? All right. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application? The applicant online would appear.
Yes, can you hear me?
What is your name, sir?
My name is Ron Freer from Prestige.
All right, please go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to, like the gentleman before me, I'd like to do a little bit of a shout out to David Harding. He's been excellent to work with, but yeah, as he stated, there's really nothing, you know, he's pretty thorough, so there was really nothing much I can add to that.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions of the applicant?
No.
And thank you as well, sir, for your comments with respect to Mr. Harding. We'll just have to be careful with him now. We got to get all these compliments, so. All right. Thank you, sir, for that. All right. Is there anyone, did you have any more to say, sir?
No, sir.
Thank you. All right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? All right. Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? All right. Appearing to be none, I would ask the committee. Mrs. Archer, as I saw your hand, Mr. Strangway, seconder. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? Thank you. All right. Moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2020-037, and this is 18 Westlake Court, Geographic Township of Fenelon, and we have a memo attached indicating a deferral. Mr. Stainton, do you wish to speak to the memo?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. So on November 23rd, 2020, the owner informed the planning division that the property's existing home occupation will be expanded into the detached garage that is proposed in the minor variance application. Upon discussing the issue with one of the owners, it was recognized that due to a misunderstanding of the definition of home occupation within the Township of Fenelon zoning bylaw, information surrounding the operation of a home occupation was omitted from the application. Home occupations are permitted within detached buildings, subject to specific provisions being met. In the absence of the specific information pertaining to the nature of the operation and the gross floor area involved with the home occupation, planning staff discussed options in terms of pursuing the application and recommended deferring the application until such time as all of the requisite information relating to the home occupation is identified, provided, and analyzed. The analysis will determine if an additional relief or additional reliefs are required from the zoning bylaw. As a result, planning staff is requesting the committee consider deferring the application for a period of not more than 4 months, returning at the latest to the March 2021 meeting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the deferral? All right. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of the application? In support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? Committee, we're looking at a deferral motion, and the only thing to be discussed is the time, so I would suggest the motion read that it be deferred to the March 2021 meeting unless the application is considered complete prior to then. Okay, Mrs. Richards, and seconded by Mr. Strangway. All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Moving right along. We're now dealing with file number D20-2020-038. This is 8 Shields Lane, Geographic Township of Bexley. And again, Mr. Stainton, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose and effect of the application is to seek relief from the following provisions in order to permit the construction of a detached garage. One, the first relief is to increase the maximum allowable lot coverage of all accessory buildings and structures, excluding private garages attached to the main building and outdoor swimming pools from 225 square meters to 289.65 square meters. And secondly, to increase the maximum number of accessory buildings or structures, excluding outdoor swimming pools, from 3 to 4. I'd like to note that the first relief proposed should actually read buildings and not bwindings as stated in the report. Again, the purpose of the application is to permit the construction of a replacement detached garage of 111.48 square meters, which is approximately 1,200 square feet. The garage will replace an existing coverall garage in order to facilitate the storage of lawn maintenance equipment. Next slide, please. The subject property is situated on Indian Point along the shore of Balsam Lake. The private neighborhood is comprised of larger shoreline residential lots that contain mature trees and a high degree of privacy. To the north, Indian Point Provincial Park dominates the interior of the peninsula. Access is obtained from Shields Lane, which is a private laneway branching off of Indian Point Road. Next slide, please. Shown here is a site plan of the proposal showing the proposed location of the garage in relation to the property. Next slide, please. The subject property is fairly flat and surrounded on all sides by dense mixed deciduous forest, which can be seen on the right, which effectively screens the property from the road and neighboring lots. The dwelling can be seen in both photos. Next slide, please. Shown on the left is the neighboring property to the northwest, which is identified as 812 Indian Point Road. Noteworthy is the fact that the landowners are pursuing a lot line adjustment with the owners of 812 Indian Point Road, which will alter the lot configuration by increasing the overall area of both lots. The photo on the right shows the proximity of the dwelling to the neighboring property to the southeast. Next slide, please. Since the proposed garage is to be constructed in virtually the same footprint as the existing pole garage, which is actually shown in the distance on the photo on the right, no adverse impacts to the neighborhood are anticipated due to the presence of vegetative buffers and overall spatial separation. The photo on the left is taken from the shoreline facing the single detached dwelling. Next slide. The proposed location of the replacement garage is over 35 meters from Indian Point Road and over 39 meters from Shields Lane. The garage will provide additional amenity and storage space on the lot without adversely impacting the function of the front yard. Shown here are two shots of the existing garage, with the photo on the left facing southeast from the northwestern corner of the property, and the photo on the right is looking southwest. Next slide, please. Again, two more photos of the proposed garage location, looking to the north on the left and northeast on the right towards Indian Point Road. Next slide, please. The general provisions set a maximum coverage of 8% for accessory buildings or structures to a maximum of 225 square meters. On smaller residential properties, the provision can restrict the ability to construct sufficiently sized buildings or structures. The modest 28.7 increase, note the percentage was incorrectly calculated as 36% in the report for some reason, in lot coverage to 289.65 square meters acknowledges the proposed detached garage, the boathouse, the second detached garage, and the woodshed. The total lot coverage for all four accessory buildings is only 1.3%. Shown here is the boathouse taken from the south and north sides respectively. Next slide, please. Shown here is a photo of the existing detached garage that was constructed in 1960 according to MPAC. On the right, you can barely see the location of the existing coverall garage, which is kind of in the middle of the screen in the distance. Next slide, please. Respecting the number of accessory buildings being increased from 3 to 4, the removal of the woodshed from the property, shown here on both slides, may cause the owner undue hardship, as the structure also provides essential housing for a component of the HVAC system comprised of two large fans, shown on the right. The current location of the woodshed not only conceals the fans, but it also acts as a sound barrier for the fans. Comments were received from Building Division and the Engineering and Corporate Assets Division with no concerns. The Part 8 Sewage Systems Supervisor is also satisfied that no impacts to the septic system will result from the location of the proposed garage. Kawartha Conservation did provide comments today, as a matter of fact, identifying that a permit would be required. They have since provided comments identifying that a geotechnical assessment, which was originally proposed, is no longer required to facilitate the permit. Based on the contents of the report, it is the opinion of staff that the application meets the 4 tests of minor variance, and respectfully, staff recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stainton. Are there any questions of the planner? Yeah, Mr. Strangway, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one very brief question. You alluded to a lot line adjustment. I'm just wondering if you could give us a little more detail on that.
Certainly. The lots between the two lots that were subject 812 Indian Point Road as well as 8 Shields Lane, there are 2 shared lots between them, and the proponent is in the process of basically enlarging their 2 respectful lots to include those lots in between. My assumption is that because of the length of time that it takes for the consent process from start to finish, that the applicant wished to proceed with the variance for the garage in the meantime.
Thanks for that. That's helpful.
Ms. Archer, go ahead.
Through you, please, to Mr. Stainton. In Appendix A, it shows an unopened road allowance that appears to go through the middle of this property. Where is the garage in relation to that, and does it cause a problem?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the unopened road allowance does not in fact exist in that location. That is a bit of a misnomer that was provided.
Can't trust those maps. Anything further of the applicant? Or of the planner? I'll be all right. All right, thank you, Mr. Staton. Ms. Archer, go ahead.
Through you again, please, to Mr. Staton. On rationale number 3, it says, as of right, a private garage is permitted. This will make 2, so am I, like, is more than 1 private garage permitted in the front?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes. The interpretation of the zoning bylaw is that single means plural and plural means singular. So therefore, yes, multiple garages can occur on the property.
Anything further? All right. I see the applicant there. Could you state your name, please, sir?
Yes, it's Tom DeBoer with TD Consulting, and I'm just here to ask or answer any questions, should there be any. It seems to be a straightforward application at this point, and I don't see any concerns, but if there are, I'd be happy to answer the questions.
Right, and thank you for that, and I'll ask, are there any questions of the consultant? All right, being none, thank you for taking the time, sir. All right, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Opposition to the application? All right, being none, committee. Mrs. Archer. Mr. Strangler, you're going to second that? Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right, moving right along. We're now involved with file number D20-2020-039, and this is 12 Lake Street, Geographic Township of Bexley. And again, Mr. Staton, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose and effect of this application is to seek relief from the following provisions in order to permit the construction of a new 2-story cottage, attached deck, and a garden shed. So in relation to the 2-story cottage, a relief is sought to reduce the minimum lot frontage requirement from 12 meters to 10.41 meters, and to reduce the exterior side yard setback for the construction of the replacement dwelling from 7.5 meters to 1.2 meters. In terms of the deck that is proposed, relief is sought to permit an increased deck projection from 1.5 meters to 2.4 meters into the water yard, and to increase the allowable deck height from 1.2 meters to 1.45 meters. In addition, another relief is sought to reduce the minimum setback from the environmental protection zone boundary from 15 meters to 12.6 meters. In regard to the garden shed, a relief is sought to reduce the minimum setback for an accessory building closer to the street than the required front yard setback for the zone from 7.5 meters to 6.16 meters. The proposal again involves an existing cottage and the construction of a new 136.93 square meter or 1,474 square foot 2-story cottage with an attached 14 square meter or 150.7 square foot wooden deck. A new 9.91 square meter or 106.67 square foot garden shed will be located on the backlot portion of the subject lands. Next slide, please. Upon applying for a building permit to demolish the existing cottage, the building and zoning clerk identified that the lands immediately to the north of the subject property are part of a road allowance. The applicant sought clarification from the planning division in regard to the ownership of the abutting lands to the north of the existing parcel. Following correspondence with Realty Services Division, it was determined that the lands to the north are owned by the city of Kawartha Lakes in the form of a road allowance. As such, the property is considered a corner lot. Therefore, the side yard is considered an exterior side yard for the purposes of implementing the zoning bylaw. It is important to note that Lake Street is a municipal unassumed road, and the subject lands are comprised of a waterfront lot and a back lot. The property has two separate property identification numbers and is under one assessment roll number, and based on the legal descriptions under both parcel registers, the lots are deemed to be separately conveyable and not tied together. In order to lessen the number of reliefs sought through the application, the applicant has agreed to enter into a merger agreement to legally tie the two parcels together. A condition is recommended in order to ensure the registration of the agreement against both parcels. The subject property, as shown here in the aerial photo, is situated along the western shoreline of Balsam Lake. The lots on the stretch of Lake Street are narrow, with smaller cottages and shoreline residences occupying the neighborhood. I note in the report, the word neighborhood was omitted, and I do apologize for that. Access to the subject lands are achieved via private right-of-way, which is known as Poplar Grove Trail, which intersects with Lake Street. Many of the properties in the area possess exclusive backlots, again, as shown in the aerial image, either containing accessory buildings or remaining as vacant. The backlot of the subject property is currently vacant, with a two-story garage situated on the abutting backlot to the south, which you will see in the future slides. Next slide, please. Shown here is a site plan of the proposed cottage. As I mentioned, the subject property is very narrow, containing a small cottage that was constructed circa 1920. A storage shed between the cottage and the shoreline was constructed in 1950, according to MPAC, and contains an attached deck. An additional parking space is available on the back lot in order for the property to comply with parking provisions of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. Shown here are the proposed northern and southern elevations for the cottage. Next slide, please. The drawing on the left shows the Lake Street facing, or the western elevation of the proposal, with the sketch on the right showing the shore facing, or the eastern elevation. The proposed design of the cottage incorporates elements of modern and traditional design and will add to the overall character of the neighborhood. The elevated deck with glass paneled railing transitions to, a glass paneled railing transitions to an amenity space within the rear yard towards the lake. Next slide, please. The slide shown here with the photo on the left shows the existing cottage on the property, with the photo on the right showing the view from the front yard towards the back lot and Poplar Grove Trail. So that is basically a west-facing shot towards Poplar Grove Trail. Next slide, please. Here is another photo on the left showing the existing cottage, with the photo on the right taken facing northwards up Lake Street. Given the narrow configuration of the lot, relief from the minimum frontage provision is required, and the existing 10.41 meter frontage for the lot of record can accommodate a new holding tank as well as one parking space on the waterside lot. Next slide, please. These photos just illustrate some of the built form in the immediate neighborhood, with the lot to the south shown on the left, and on the and to the north, which is basically north of the road allowance, on the right-hand side. The proposed built form complements the variety in the immediate neighborhood. Next slide, please. Shown on the left is the aforementioned storage shed, as well as the cottage when viewed from the shoreline. And then the photo on the right is just giving you an overview of the cottage lands down to the shoreline. Next slide, please. The vacant backlot is shown in both photos here, and it carries over the narrow lot configuration from the waterfront lot portion of the property. As you can see on the photo on the left, there is a neighboring shed, or a shed on the neighboring property to the south that can be seen, and as well as the intersection with Poplar Grove Trail and Lake Street shown on the right. Next slide, please. This is just another photo of the back lot taken towards the, the photo on the left is taken facing Lake Street, just giving you an appreciation for its vacancy, with the photo on the right taken facing westward. You can see the neighboring garage on 10 Lake Street in the photo on the left, right. Next slide, please. Dense vegetation along the northern, which is shown on the left, and southern, shown on the right, lot lines provide substantial privacy from neighboring lots. The applicant is trying to preserve as much of the existing vegetation as possible through the proposed construction. No adverse massing impacts are anticipated due to the presence of the vegetative buffers on both side yards of the waterfront parcel. Next slide, please. The proposed exterior side yard distance of 1.2 meters is of sufficient space to provide for lot and building maintenance, with the opposite interior side yard setback providing space for accessibility to the rear yard. In fact, the existing one-story cottage is partially situated within the unopened road allowance. Therefore, the variance drastically improves the overall situation for the cottage. The photo on the left shows the existing cottage in relation to the road allowance, and the picture on the right again illustrates just how dense the vegetation along the road allowance is. Next slide, please. The zoning bylaw, through its environmental protection and water setbacks, establishes a minimum spatial separation standards from the shoreline of Balsam Lake. The setback also ensures that built form does not dominate the shoreline. In order to accommodate the location of the holding tank and achieve sufficient parking, the proposed cottage and deck have been shifted as far west on the site as possible while complying with the minimum front yard setback. The proposed 12.6 meter setback and increased deck projection and height is appropriate and does not introduce any adverse massing impacts or land use conflicts. The deck projection into the setback is less prominent due to the removal of the existing wooden shed and attached deck, which basically represents a substantial improvement over the current 5.8 meter water setback. It is important to note that the proposal also meets the intent of the waterfront designation policies within the official plan. The photo on the left here illustrates the view of the property from the existing dock, just showing the naturalized shoreline, with the photo on the right showing the built form of the lot to the south. Next slide, please. While the purpose of the environmental protection zone setback is also to provide sufficient space to allow for the establishment of a buffer and for infiltration of stormwater runoff, the location of the deck represents a minor encroachment relative to the previous extent of development. The purpose and function of the EP setback remains in the space to the east of the proposed deck and is, in fact, enhanced through the removal of the wooden shed. A condition is recommended in order to confirm removal of the wooden shed. On the left is a view of the shoreline to the north, while the picture on the right shows the current setback from the extent of the deck to the shoreline. Next slide, please. As a result of the development on the waterfront portion of the property, locating a utility garden shed on the back lot is sensible. Through pursuing a merger agreement and tying the two parcels together, the garden shed may stand alone on the back lot. Given the narrow shape of the corner lot, the 1.34 meter reduced front yard setback for the accessory structure maintains an appropriate setback from Poplar Grove Trail, as shown on the photo on the right. Comments on the application were received from the Building Division and Engineering and Corporate Assets Division with no concerns. The Part 8 sewage system supervisor is also satisfied that no impacts to the septic system will result from the construction. In fact, a new holding tank is proposed through the application. Kawartha Conservation also provided comments, and a permit is required prior to undertaking works on the subject property. Based on the contents of the report, it is the opinion of staff that the application meets all 4 tests of a minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified within the report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? I have a couple of questions. On page 5 of 7, right at in the first paragraph there, you've got, in fact, the existing one-story cottage is partially situated within the unopened road allowance. Therefore, the variance drastically improves the overall situation of the cottage. And I'm hoping you mean by that it is being moved entirely away from the road allowance.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it is indeed. In fact, it will be 1.2 meters from the extent of the road allowance.
And the other one, I guess, is just we'll call it a computer glitch, I guess, but I noticed on this report that we don't have any section for public comments. And that probably is one of the most important components that we have here. You've got, they all have it. I was just surprised that that one didn't. So I'll just leave that for future reference. Thank you.
That is noted, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I just wanted to inform you that no public comments were received as part of this application.
Thank you. All right. Anything further of the planner? Is the applicant online? Does the applicant wish to speak to the application?
Yes, he does.
All right. And your name, sir?
Michael Goucher.
Thank you.
I'm
Go
with
ahead.
My wife, the applicant Nancy, is with me today.
Go ahead, sir.
Chair and committee, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to having Ken to review and prepare a report. I found it fair and reasonable. I'd like to reaffirm the works that we are doing. We found that through our investigation to replace our building, that the property just did not comply at all. Right? We were encroaching onto the road right of way. The building, the shed closer to the lake, it's far too close to the lake. It's even below the flood elevation. And our proposal reflects to remove all that and improve that buffer strip as best we can. With that, I will leave it with you. I'd be remiss to also thank Ken for his support and help preparing this application for your review today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the applicant? Well, again, it would appear, sir, that you've, to the best of your ability, covered all the bases, so we thank you for that. And, right. All right, is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application, in support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? All right, committee. Mr. Strangway, Mrs. Richardson, comments or questions on the motion? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. All right. We're now dealing with file number D20-2020-040, and this is 19 Naylor Road, Geographic Township of Fenland. Mr. Stainton, you're a busy fellow today. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. The purpose and effect of this application is to request relief from the following provisions in order to permit the construction of a one-story boat storage facility. The first relief sought is to reduce the required number of parking spaces for a dryland marina use from 233 spaces to 50 spaces, including 3 accessible spaces. and to reduce the minimum number of loading spaces for a building with a floor area greater than 2,001 square meters from 2 to 0. Just for some background, the city was approached by the applicant regarding a proposal in order to construct an indoor heated boat storage facility on the subject lands. In order for the project to proceed, an amendment to the existing site plan agreement would be required. During preliminary consultation, it was recognized that relief would be required in order to reduce the number of parking and loading spaces required for the facility in accordance with the provisions for a dry land marina as defined in the Township of Fenelon zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. The subject property is situated along the Highway 35 corridor immediately south of the hamlet of Cameron. The specific parcel contains several uses, including a boat docking equipment manufacturing facility and an associated showroom, an indoor vehicle storage facility, and a salvage yard. The vast majority of the eastern half of the property remains vacant and contains patches of forest as well as several watercourses. Rural residential properties are scattered around the site. Next slide, please. The proposal, as shown here on the preliminary site plan, involves the construction of a 4,645.15 square meter or a 50,000 square foot indoor boat storage facility with a proposed 50 parking spaces, including 3 accessible spots and 0 loading spaces. There will be no office space within the proposed building. Again, a preliminary site plan is shown here. Next slide, please. The location of the proposed boat storage facility is in the northwest corner of the site and will be situated on flat land that has been filled with gravel. Fencing exists around the western and northern property lines and was being installed on the eastern extent of the property when I was conducting the site visit. The photo on the left shows an overview of the proposed location for the boat storage facility taken from the shoulder of Highway 35 looking to the northeast, with the photo on the right being taken further north along Highway 35 facing southeast. Next slide, please. According to the preliminary site plan, a 6-meter vegetative buffer will be preserved surrounding the perimeter of the site. Noteworthy is the fact that the building complies with all other provisions of the zoning bylaw, and no adverse massing impacts are anticipated as a result. This slide gives an overview of the property's location in relation to the hamlet of Cameron, shown on the left, with Cameron just to the north, with an adjacent residential property to the north shown on the photo to the right. Side yard setback requirements are in compliance with the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. This slide just gains an appreciation for some of the properties in the vicinity of the subject lands. So there is a rural residential property that is immediately to the west of the subject lands. Some of it is under agricultural production, as you can see. With the photo on the right showing properties to the southwest, there are several rural residential properties on that western side of Highway 35. Next slide, please. This slide shows, just for context, this slide is showing the western boundary of the site facing north on the left, and on the south side, facing south, sorry, on the photo to the left, just to gain context, again, for the location of the property. Next slide, please. The indoor heated boat storage facility will accommodate up to 150 watercraft and will provide a desired service locally. With the proposal only involving the storage of boats, no repair or sale deliveries are anticipated, thus limiting traffic and noise disturbances. Through correspondence with the owner, drop-off and pickup times will be no later than 5 p.m. and will operate on an appointment-only basis. Customers will wait in the designated parking area while a staff member retrieves their boat, similar to a valet service. No self-storage of boats will occur. All payments will be coordinated through the existing showroom office with access to the site occurring from the existing entrance from Naylor Road, preventing traffic impacts along Highway 35. No new entrances are proposed through this application. Shown on the left is the existing showroom office for the facility with, again, a duplicate slide from, or sorry, a duplicate photo from the previous slide, just looking southbound on Highway 35. Next slide, please. For additional context, the photo on the left shows Naylor Road facing westward, with the photo on the right illustrating the access road on the property that will take customers to the boat storage facility. Next slide, please. The parking and loading provisions for a use classified as dry land marina in the Township of Fenland zoning bylaw typically require 1 parking space per 20 square meters of gross floor area, as well as 2 loading spaces if a building is larger than 2001 square meters in size. Given the proposed gross floor area of the facility, the bylaw would typically require 233 parking spaces and 2 loading spaces. The photos shown here are taken from the southern extent of the development looking. So basically what's shown here is you're looking westward along Naylor Road, again with the access to the facility shown on the right. Next slide, please. And here the photos that we are showing are taken from the southern extent of the development. So this is where the boat storage facility will be located, looking eastward and to the north on the photo to the right. Next slide, please. The proposed building will function more as a storage facility than a retail or service use, as a similar dry light industrial storage use would only require 1 parking space per 100 square meters of gross floor area, which would result in a required 47 spaces, just for comparison. Of the 50 spaces proposed, 22 are regular parking spaces, and this should be noted as a correction from the 25 regular spaces that were identified in the report itself. 25 of the other spaces are oversized to accommodate vehicles with trailers, as well as the 3 spots that are accessible. Given the fact that appointments are required to pick up and drop off items, the overall parking requirements are significantly diminished, and the traffic to the site is rather infrequent in nature. The proposed reduction in parking standard is appropriate for this situation. Shown here are some photos of the proposed footprint of the building again, looking to the north on the photo on the left and to the west on the photo to the right. Next slide, please. Again, some more photographs of the site with the photo on the left taken west facing as well. And again, a duplicate photo on the right respectively. Next slide, please. With respect to the required loading spaces for the facility, since the only goods to be stored within the building are boats and associated trailers, no shipping and receiving of goods typically associated with manufacturing will occur. As no incoming or outgoing deliveries are proposed aside from the boats, the variance from 2 loading spaces to none is considered appropriate. Shown here are the photos of the proposed building location looking to the south and southeast. I do apologize for the lack of light. There was a storm rolling through when I was conducting the site visit that made things just a little bit challenging for a very short period of time. With respect to the official plan, under the rural designation, commercial uses are permitted, provided adequate off-street parking can be accommodated and traffic movement will not be impacted. The quantity of parking spaces is considered adequate to facilitate the use, and traffic to the site is being directed through the existing entrance from Naylor Road. Again, no new entrances are proposed as part of the project. Regarding the natural heritage features on the far eastern extent of the property, the proposed development is greater than 120 meters from the watercourses and significant woodlands. Therefore, no impacts to the natural heritage features are anticipated through the application. Comments were received from Building Division and the Engineering and Corporate Assets Division with no concerns. The Part 8 sewage system supervisor is also satisfied that no impacts to the septic system will result since there is no office space proposed for clientele within the storage facility. Based on the contents of the report, it is the opinion of staff that the application meets all 4 tests of minor variance and respectfully recommends approval of the application subject to the conditions identified in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? Mrs. Archer?
Please, to Mr. Stainton. Are there no limits to the number of buildings that can be put on this property? There seems to be quite a few when we look at Appendix B.
So in terms of the overall limits to buildings, I don't believe, what regulates that is essentially the lot coverage component, which based on the highway commercial zone portion of the property, the proposed building will not exceed. So the long and the short of it is that the lot coverage provisions would address such concerns.
Mr. Strangway, go ahead.
Thanks for your report, Kent. Just one quick question. I noticed the reduction from 233 to 50 spaces. I'm wondering how you came up with the number 50 spaces, and that still seems excessive when all the vehicles are going to be parked inside eventually. Just looking for a comment on that.
I think and I can't speak to the rationale that the proponent used. Perhaps they might be better able to answer it. But as I mentioned, with the light industrial use, based on the calculation that is provided for a building of similar size, the number would be 47 spaces. So I believe the 50 took that into consideration and also accommodated the 3 accessible sites. So it was trying to find a balance between a very similar compatible use when they made the determination. I'm fairly confident that was the rationale behind it, but I will allow the applicant to speak to that.
Thank you for that.
Anything further from committee? Very thorough job, Mr. Stainton. Very well done. Thank you. All right. Oh, could we have your name, please? Oh, we got 2. Who wants to go first?
I'll step in here. My name's Emma Drake with DM Wills Associates Limited, and we are applicant on behalf of the owner, being WMT Naylor Holdings. Just wanted to step in, as Kent mentioned, provide that rationale on the 50 spaces proposed, and Kent hit it on the head there. The rationale for that was that we were using a standard for a similar use for, so in the zoning bylaw, the standard for storage uses specifically would come out at 47 spaces. And as ultimately this is what this facility is proposing, we propose the 50 spaces to be in line with that storage standard. I do want to thank Kent for his assistance and his report on this application, and I'm here to answer any questions, as is Matt.
Anyone else? Did the other applicant wish to speak? Or the applicant wish to speak? No?
Afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Kent very much for being diligent and coming out and answering all of my questions. It was fantastic. Oh.
Your name?
My name's Matthew Naylor.
All right, thank you. We got that straight. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm just here to answer any questions if there are any.
All right, thank you for that. Are there any questions of Mr. Naylor? All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of the application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Being none, committee. Mr. Strangway.
As indicated, as read.
All right, do I have a seconder? Mrs. Archer. Any further comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. All right, we're dealing with file number D20-2020-041, and this is 71 Perfectus Drive, former village of Bob Cajun. And Mr. Harding's back. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application proposes to permit the construction of a screen porch addition to a single detached dwelling. The committee authorized variances to permit renovations and additions to the existing dwelling last year. Those works were contained either within the existing footprint or very close to it. So this represents a new projection beyond that approval last year. So the subject property is located within a neighborhood on the southwestern side of Bob Cajun that is composed of a mixture of seasonal and year-round residential uses. And the property is at the terminus of Perfectus Drive, which transitions into a driveway for this property. The property itself is short and wide and abuts water on three sides, being the north, northwest, and kind of south. And the property comes to a point on the southwestern side. And there is a high degree of canopy cover on this parcel. I'm just looking for the slide deck and I don't see that up at this point. Thank you. Wonderful. So here we can see that, that point that I was talking about on the southwestern side of the parcel. Next slide, please. All right, and here, committee, we can see the existing approvals that were granted last year. This dwelling has 3 distinct hexagons, and you can see some gray area that were the expansions to that existing footprint authorized last year. And then it is a white rectangular box, which is to the south of the most southern hexagon, which is where the proposed screened porch is. So next slide, please. So here we have some elevations of the dwelling. The screen porch is shown on the bottom image on the far right-hand side. So we can see it's a single story structure. Next slide, please. And we're just rotating around a bit here. So the image on the upper portion of your screen, that is going to be as viewed from about the eastern side of the parcel. And then the image on the bottom is taken looking kind of south into the parcel. Next slide, please. So here we have pictures of the entrance of the parcel, which is for the image on the left, the right-hand side. So we're at the terminus of Perfectus Drive leading in. The driveway kind of curves around and the dwelling is located further back. It's in the middle, but in the back there. And then the image on the right is me just pivoting a little bit from that image on the left. And we can see the faded kind of black image of the dwelling on the left side of that photograph. Next slide, please. So in these two images, I'm sitting generally on the south side of the dwelling. So the image on the left is taken showing kind of that northern or northwestern shoreline and the dwelling face there. And then the sunroom is going to be proposed on the right side of that image. And then in the right image there, I've just pivoted slightly so we can see the kind of the southern extent of the dwelling where the sunroom would be, which is roughly between that edge and the cedar tree, which is standing just off to the left in that photo there. And that also captures the southern shoreline as well, where the canoes are sitting. So in this particular case, even though the addition is projecting towards the southern lot line, because the dwelling is still kind of cozied up to that northwestern lot line, relief is being sought from the water setback on that side because that is still the closest point between the shoreline and where the construction is proposed. Next, oh, that's the final slide. Okay, so now we'll get into my analysis. So I believe it does meet the 4 tests for minor variance. So the construction will allow for the creation of additional covered amenity space to the south of the existing dwelling. The footprint expansion is proposed away from that northern shoreline, But as I've noted, due to the pointed nature of this property, if you get away from one shoreline, you are still coming closer to another. That being said, the extent of the intrusion is fairly minimal given the overall shoreline that remains vegetated on this parcel. And the owner has gone through great lengths, as in the previous application, to retain as much tree cover as possible. So I expect that to continue to be the case for this new addition to the dwelling, which is going to help screen any adverse massing impacts that would result from the construction of this proposal. But I'm not expecting there to really be any anyway, because it is a single-story screen porch that is proposed. So as the Bob Cajun secondary plan is under appeal, the Victoria County official plan is the applicable document, and these lands are designated urban within that document, which provides for residential uses. So staff does respectfully recommend that the application be granted, subject to the conditions identified in the report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions, planner? All right, being none. Is the applicant online? There's the applicant. Could you state your name, please?
Megan Sanderson on behalf of W.E. Outred and Associates. We're the applicant for the owner, the Walshes.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'd like to thank David for his efforts with regards to this application and giving me the opportunity to speak. They're proposing just a 30 square meter approximately sunroom addition, as David indicated. It's going to be built on helical piers, so there's minimal excavation and disturbance to the land. And that's essentially it.
All right, thank you. We're going to have to be careful with all these accolades for Mr. Harding. Next thing you know, he'll be wanting a raise or something. You know what I'm saying? So,
I'm sure he deserves it.
questions of the applicant? All right, being none, thank you. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Committee, Mrs. Richardson.
As recommended by staff.
Do I have a seconder? Mrs. Archer. All right. Any further comments or questions? That, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Certainly, last but certainly not least, we have file number D20-2020-042, and this is vacant land on King Street East, former village of Bob Cajun. And again, Mr. Harding, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application seeks to permit reductions to the front and rear yard setbacks, as well as to increase the maximum permitted lot coverage in order to permit a single attached dwelling that has an accessory dwelling unit. So this property is located on a vacant lot along King Street East in Bob Cajun, which received approval from the Director of Development Services to be created, I believe it was last year. 2017, it's been a little bit. So that property, after it was severed, has remained vacant for some time, and now it's been picked up by the current owner who's proposing this built form. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we can see here, there's the subject parcel. Originally, it belonged to the address to the west, which is 60 King Street East. Next slide, please. So here we have the proposed dwelling unit with the accessory dwelling unit. And we have some at-grade decks that are proposed in the front and the rear yards as well. The parking is proposed to the east of the dwelling, within kind of the side of the front yard and the interior side yard. Next slide, please. So here we are looking at the subject property from across the road. So we have 60 King Street East on the left side in both of those photographs, with the subject property and its driveway access right in front of us there. Next slide, please. So what I've done, committee, is from those two previous images, I've tilted to the west on the image to the left and to the east for the image on the right. So in both of these images, we can see that we are progressing slowly into the downtown core of Bobcaygeon from this spot. So this property is about at that pivoting point where we start that transition into a more urbanized commercial area leading into Main Street. So on the right-hand side, we've got some single detached dwellings, which are a little bit further away from the road, but they are slowly coming closer to the road. And then the image on the left is showing all of the other commercial uses, which are much closer to the road, creating that more pedestrian-friendly urban environment. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of glare on that image on the left. It looks better actually on the camera, but this is taken on the subject property looking out across the road. So we have some low-rise commercial uses, which are set back from the road a bit to allow for the parking lots. And then the image on the right is again across the road from the subject property looking east to capture those single detached dwelling uses on the left-hand side. And then on the right, we can see the Bobcaygeon Service Center. Next slide, please. Okay, so then just taking into account some of the urban qualities of this neighborhood again. So the image on the right is looking out across the front yard of 60 King Street East, looking to the west into that commercial, more downtown type area. So we can see all the commercial uses there. And then the image on the left is me just turning the camera a little bit to the south side of King Street East there to capture some of those other commercial buildings that are again bringing the built form closer to the roadway. Next slide, please. So now we're moving into the subject property. So in both of these images here, I'm standing within the rear yard of the severed lot. So the image on the right is, in both of these cases, committee, you'll see that there's these raised flower beds. So the flower bed, which is almost immediately in line with the photograph or the left side of the photograph, that's about where the edge of the dwelling is proposed. And then the image on the left is that same flower bed, but taken looking towards 60 King Street East. So you've got that flower bed that's in the middle of the picture. The left side of that flower bed, that's about where the rear dwelling wall of this proposal is proposed to be. And then we've got the dwelling of 60 King Street East in the background there. Next slide, please. And this one is capturing a little bit more of the rear lot line. It was very hard to take a picture close up, so I decided to get further back to better capture the whole of the lot and just what was beyond there. So we've got a single attached dwelling on the lot behind, which you can see is that kind of yellow rectangle on the left-hand side, and there's a little shed back there too. On the right-hand side, if I could just ask for the slides to be backed up one, please. I forgot to also mention for the image on the right-hand side again, so we're looking across the subject property to the east. So picking up that raised flower bed that's on the left side of this picture on the right. So the rightmost side of that flower bed on the left there, again, that's about where the rear wall of the dwelling is supposed to be. And you can see it's about in line with the single attached garage, which is on the property to the east there. So again, we're kind of keeping in character with the established built form within the rear yards of these abutting residential lots. So based on what I see walking the site and doing my analysis is we have a lot that's within a transitional zone. We're going from very large or larger single detached dwelling uses into a more urbanized street-friendly environment. And you are seeing that gradual stepping from the single attached dwellings that are further east along King Street East. They're slowly coming towards the road, with 60 King Street East being the closest. I believe it's just under 3 meters from the road. So this dwelling is again rounding out and kind of finishing off that stepping nature that we see, transitioning to that more commercial pedestrian friendly environment that is to the west. And in terms of the rear yard amenity space, it is still sufficient. It's consistent with the established built form on either side of us. That being said, can we go to the next slide, please? That being said, I do recognize that we are bringing that rear dwelling wall closer to the lot line, and we have some vegetation there. Some of it's on the neighboring property, some of it is on this one, so there will likely be a loss of privacy there. We did receive comments from Sue Raskin, which is the abutting neighbor to the rear there at 68 Mead Street, which has expressed concern with respect to bringing that dwelling wall closer to the lot line and the loss of privacy that she expects will happen as a result of that. Staff recognizes the validity of that concern and is requesting that a fence be constructed in accordance with her comments in order to mitigate those privacy impacts. And as a result, I am recommending amendments be made to the conditions. So first is that we would be inserting a new condition as condition 2, which would read as follows: that the owner shall construct a privacy fence along the rear lot line and submit to the Secretary Treasurer's satisfaction photographic evidence of its construction. This condition shall be completed within a period of 18 months after the date of the notice of decision, failing which this application shall be deemed to be refused, and the standard sunset clause that is currently represented as condition number 2 would become condition number 3 and would stay the same sort of sentence structure except for the last bit. So where we have the condition currently finishing with "this condition will be considered fulfilled upon completion of the first building inspection," we would add to that sentence the following line: "and the clearance of condition 2." So again, that final sentence of the new condition 3 would now read that this condition will be considered fulfilled upon completion of the first building inspection and the clearance of condition 2, just to make sure that as part of the building permit process, that fence does get erected and dealt with. So staff does respectfully recommend that the application be granted, subject to the conditions noted in the report as amended by staff. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the planner? Ms. Archer?
Please to Mr. Harding. Can you explain the difference between a dwelling that has an accessory dwelling and a duplex?
Yes, I will do my best. So a duplex has a very specific arrangement of the dwelling units in relation to one another. My understanding is that one has to be on top of the other. Whereas in this case, we have basically a front to back situation that's also side by side.
Sort of a townhouse kind of thing?
I'd almost think similar to a semi, but just oriented in another way.
Good question. I had it myself. Yes, Mr. Strangway, go ahead.
Thank you. David, just a follow-up to that. I had the exact same question. I was sitting here reading construction of a single detached dwelling and accessory dwelling. Is accessory, the word accessory, normally used for another dwelling?
Through the chair, I'll do my best to explain this, but Mr. Hawley might be able to do a better job. But basically, the province has come out with policy that requires municipalities to create situations where additional dwellings can be added to existing homes. And my understanding of how the bylaw treats these, where they are permitted, is that the primary dwelling unit is considered the dwelling unit, and the accessory dwelling unit is not technically counted as another dwelling unit for the purposes of applying a dwelling unit capacity within the zoning bylaw.
Mr. Hawley, did you wish to add to that?
No, that David's explanation is correct. We do have provisions in the urban zoning bylaws that allow for accessory residential units. They can be, from a form perspective, they can be either within an existing dwelling, or they could be attached to another dwelling. Soon we'll be allowing them in in accessory buildings, so on the second floor of an accessory structure primarily, but for now, this would qualify under the definition of an accessory residential unit. The policy or the provincial policy basically requires that the main dwelling, as David said, is the main dwelling. The accessory residential unit cannot be any larger than the main dwelling unit, but it can be of equal size. So I think just looking from the drawing here, it looks they are from equal size. But in this case, you're correct that the analogy of a semi-detached turned sideways, it's sort of what this is, but it does meet the zoning and the provincial policy requirements.
Follow up?
Thanks for that. So if one was to look at this, are there two separate entrances and is everything separated, or is it one unit where access to the accessory building, you have to go through it? Just what is the makeup of this?
Mr. Harding?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the applicant might be better to explain that, but my understanding is that they are essentially two separate self-contained dwelling units that share a common wall.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's highly unusual, I guess. When I read it, the same questions, but I understand that because of the new provincial requirements, I guess these sort of things may be happening even more. So it's just certainly the questions aren't unexpected. All right. Anything further of the planner? All right. The applicant. Oh, we got the chief building official there. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I just have one question for the planner. I'm just wondering, in this instance, should we also include a condition that they are required to register the unit, just to ensure that it is captured as an accessory residential unit and not just as a two-unit dwelling?
Mr. Harding?
Yes, I am very supportive of adding that condition.
All right. You got that, Mark? Yep. All right. Thank you. Anything further of the planners? Or Mr. Holly? Yeah, Ms. Zark?
I'm not sure who to address this one to, but I really, the parking looks very, very bad when it's snowy. Like, how do parkings 2 and 4 get out if 1 and 3 are there?
I guess through the chair, it would really be no different than if you had a semi-detached dwelling. You might have 2 parking spaces in front of the dwelling itself, and you just have to marshal the cars around, right? I have that in my driveway too when there's lots of people there, and that'd be no different in this case either. So
These would they not be owned by different people, like not in the same house? So like, do parkings 1 and 2 go with dwelling 1 and 3 and 4 go with dwelling 2, or how does that work?
I would suspect that one dwelling gets one side and the other dwelling gets the other side. So they'd have control over one side of the parking area. Perhaps Mr. DeBoer could answer that question.
I see the consultant there, so maybe he'll have some further information. Before I go to him, is there anything further of the planner? All right, Mr. DeBoer, go ahead, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody, again. Just to answer a few of the quick questions, the parking, as alluded to, 1 and 2 go with Unit 1 and 3 and 4 go with Unit 2. They will have 2 separate and distinct entrances in the center of the structure. Not sure how familiar everybody is with Need Street, which is just around the corner. We actually did the same built form last year at 56 Need Street through the entire building permit process, as it didn't need any minor variances. But it's basically the same structure that we're building. And when we do them in this fashion, either the homeowner lives in one unit and rents the other, and or rents both of the units, as they cannot be for individual sale. So it always still maintains one ownership, but there's just 2 available units on the property. So hopefully that clarifies that. And in addition to the comments that David had originally, and him and I have been working through some of the side notes as well that have been added, and we're okay with all of the additions that have been proposed today. So if there's any other questions, feel free.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions of the consultant? All right, thank you again. Is there anyone online wishing to speak in support of this application? In support of this application? Anyone online wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Opposition to the application? Any further comments or questions? All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Now, it was left in your package there, the proposed Committee of Adjustment dates for 2021. And looking at those dates, just everyone's familiar, I need a motion to put those dates officially on the scene. So, Mr. Strangway, do I have a seconder? Mrs. Richardson? All right. Any further comments or questions on the dates? Okay. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Anything else under other business from committee? Mr. Steinway.
Just one question. I see Richard's still there. Do we have any indication of the implications with regard to the changes that the Ontario government is making related to the role of conservation boards as we move forward?
Mr. Hawley? Did you hear that, Richard, the question?
I did. It's a good question. We haven't looked into that as comprehensively yet. I know it's been brought up by a number of I had a meeting with the Environmental Advisory Committee last week, and they brought it up as well. I'll have to take that up with Chris Marshall, our director, to sort of see if we're going to put something forward corporately on that matter. But it is a good question.
Right. Speaking of it in a generous tone, I believe to some degree it's limiting their scope.
Yes, it would be. Yes, that's what I understand it to be. Yes.
Anything further?
Thanks for that, Richard. I'd be very interested to hear as we move forward what the implications are as they relate to this committee. Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Anything further under other business by committee? Anything further under other business by staff? Mr. Hawley, you have anything under other business?
I have nothing else today. Thank you.
I just want to clarify something because sometimes I get some looks when we have and I've mentioned this before, but I'll mention it again, when we have a deferral motion, and I will ask for, and I do it even if there's people here, I ask if there's anyone wishing to comment either in support of or in opposition to. And I do that for a reason, because a couple of times here over the years, we've actually had a deferral asked for, and folks appear or are online that were not advised of the deferral, were not aware of it, and or they are not able to come to any meetings. So and because of that happening, I ask. And it's a case of, the first thing I ask is, are you able to attend another meeting? And if the answer is probably not or whatever, then as far as I'm concerned, it's a courtesy to take their comments, place them on record, and then when the actual plan or the application evolves, as part of that, the applicant will be made aware of those comments and asked if they have concerns one way or the other with it. That's why I do it, because I think that we have to close the circle. And if we don't, then that's not fair to those who have come or are online and had no idea that a deferral was going to be in motion. So that's why I do that. Okay, so nothing further under other business. Well, then I guess my next move is to say, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. A little early, but we're not coming back. So, yes, the best to everyone, and as well, please stay safe. It looks like our numbers here in the city of Kawartha Lakes are creeping a little. We've had 2 more yesterday, and I haven't saw the numbers yet today. So, well, we'll keep our fingers crossed. That's all I can say. All right, can you hear me? Oh, pardon? Yes.
I see staff still here. I just wanted to wish you all the best of the season and thank you for your reports. They're really well done and your efforts are greatly appreciated.
Yeah, I keep telling them all the time. I think I mentioned today that we do appreciate the professionalism of staff, and absolutely. I didn't see the 2 planners appear there all of a sudden. See, you got to be careful with this technology. All right, did you gentlemen wish to say something? Or you're just back because you like looking at us? That's the idea?
I just wanted to wish everybody on the committee season's greetings and a wonderful new year. Stay safe. And thank you for the support and for your patience throughout this year. I know it's been a difficult one with lots of change. And we've been working quite hard to get as many applications through as possible. So we do thank you for your patience on that and sitting through the long meetings. I know that I think probably we'll have another couple of meetings that are going to be a little bit on the longer side, but I think things are starting to tail off. So that is good news from our perspective. So.
Well, you picked great times for longer meetings because what else are you going to do in the winter, right? Probably be a foot of snow on the ground. But yes, and the same to you folks. The very, very best of the season, and please stay safe. That's the big thing given these days. And it's worked here because we've all worked together. And I know you keep hearing that all the time about we've got to pull together, but the bottom line is that's the case. And so I think we're all starting to feel far more familiar and comfortable with the goings on now. I know at the first couple of meetings I was struggling, and I'm sure committee was too. It was not a lot of fun, but it's come together. So, and thank you folks for that. And Joel, thanks to you, a job well done up there. So very, very good. Alrighty, I need a motion to adjourn. Mrs. Richardson, Mrs. Archer, any comments or questions? All those in favor? And that carries. Thank you.